Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Juggernaut, and, to be brutally honest with you, I started playing Vampire Survivors. I started this run, like, literally, as you can see, 2 minutes ago, and then I thought of something, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to talk about this and make a video on it, because I think it's kind of interesting, and, well, to be brutally honest with you, I kind of want to just share my opinion with people, and see where that takes us, and maybe there's an interesting discussion to be had. Maybe it makes you, think about certain things, maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree with me, maybe something will be born out of it, right? But I think it will make for a decently interesting video. And that is, in case you couldn't tell by the title, why AAA video games aren't great anymore. Or aren't as successful anymore. And I think I first started really thinking about this, and, I wanted to kind of talk about it with someone, and, in my case, most of the time that usually means making a YouTube video, but I wanted to sort of really dive into this discussion and think about it on a perhaps somewhat higher level, and I'm writing some papers for university, and I thought, maybe I'd mention something like this, not specifically in terms of video games, though why not, but maybe, there is maybe a grander conversation to be had, and I am working on that, and I am thinking about that, and for the next 2 or 3 months I will be writing a paper for my university on some things similar to this. That's not the primary focus of my paper, but I will mention it. Because I sort of feel it is connected with what I'm writing about, but regardless of that fact, this came up, I think, initially for me on a live stream by a person called Asmongold. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because I don't actually know who this person is. I saw his live stream, or rather I saw a VOD of it, I think. Yeah, it was a VOD of it on YouTube, and I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced. I know he's extremely popular, but that's about the extent of my knowledge on this person. So if you're a fan and I'm just, doing a horrible injustice and I didn't bother researching it previously, I'm sorry, but I think this is, this VOD provoked and provided a spark. Basically, he was playing this very same game, which is why I chose it for the background of this video, and he said, how is it possible that an indie developer has made something so good, so beloved and so popular, and Bethesda can't do that? Like, Bethesda can't do that anymore. Bethesda cannot make a game this loved anymore. And it goes beyond that. I mean, Battlefield can't make a game like this. Creative Assembly can't make a game like this. Their last hit piece was Warhammer, right? And then they screwed the pooch with Warhammer 3. To the point where I think at one time it had mostly negative reviews, and even the most hardcore fans of the series went, yeah, this isn't good. This isn't what we paid for. This isn't what we expect, and this isn't a first day of the game is always terrible sort of thing. Months later, this still isn't good. Immortal Empires is supposed to come out for it, which is like a huge map and an expansion, which will connect all 3 games, because Mortal Empires currently connects 1 and 2. 3 is going to be added into that sort of system, and then that supposedly is going to make the game better, and I think undoubtedly it will. It will ditch the whole story narrative aspect of the campaign, it will ditch the whole linear aspect of the campaign, and just let you play a total war game, which, in a franchise called Total War, you'd expect to be a given, but I guess not so much anymore, and genuinely, now asking a very genuine question, why is that like so? Is it just because of corporate greed? Is it just because the developers don't have enough time to produce the game that they're, trying to produce? Oftentimes, yes. Oftentimes, it is just a lack of time. I bet you any money that if, in some circumstances, Warhammer 3 were to release a year later, and it would have come out with Immortal Empires on day 1, the reviews would have been overwhelmingly positive. That said, a full year in production is expensive. Matter of fact, it is remarkably expensive. And expenses like this aren't new to the industry. I mean, the case, the case, or rather the argument that, because nowadays everything is so expensive, games have to be rushed, doesn't really stand because everything was expensive in 2005 as well. And very importantly, games were being released unfinished in 2005 as well. And then patches were coming out, but obviously they were a lot more difficult to distribute, and, there was a whole other logistical problem behind the issue, but broken games came out with tons of bugs. Thing is, though, I get the feeling that we enjoyed them more back in the day. Or rather, the games that came out, broken as they were a lot more enjoyable. I mean, Fallout New Vegas was broken as all hell when it came out. Fallout 3 was broken as all hell when it came out. A lot of loved games and a lot of really great stuff that we all harbour fond memories towards out there came out in a not ideal state. Mind you, this was all these games that I mentioned were kind of after 2005, to be fair, but time being irrelevant, like in the last 10 years, let's say, I've noticed this trend where AAA games simply aren't doing it anymore. It seems to me like the vast majority of AAA games that come out, especially if they're based on a series like Call of Duty, Battlefield, they'll do a few things alright, and then they'll do a few things badly, and then they'll have either terrible reviews and they'll flop, a la, I don't know, No Man's Sky or something along those lines, which, by the way, after about 1 billion patches and different people working on it, did get a lot better. But it goes to show that it still doesn't do everything that was initially promised to that game. Now, don't get me wrong, it is not a bad game nowadays at all. Not a bad game at all. But after years and years of patches and DLC and, a rebranding almost of what it's supposed to be, it's still not delivering everything that was promised, and it probably never will. But it's just a digression, but I feel like a semi-relevant one, at least. So, either it will flop completely like that, or it will do average. Think about like, I don't know, what's a really great example of an average game? Warhammer 3 wasn't really average, it kind of flopped. Especially with the recent reviews and everything, and with the news that Immortal Empires is coming towards the end of this year, yeah, people were a bit upset. Understandably so. Alright, so maybe not that. Halo Infinite kind of flopped. Like, it was a fun game, the campaign was fun, and people played multiplayer, and then they stopped playing it. That's no problem, everybody stops playing a game after a while, but here's my key crucial argument for this. I've reinstalled Medieval 2 Total War, and that means that's the best game ever. I'm kidding. Though, it's a really good Total War game. I've reinstalled New Vegas 1 billion times. I've reinstalled Vampire the Masquerade many, many times, and I've played it again. And, okay, it's a bit different every time, because, you look at things a little bit differently. You've gone through some things in life, you've played other games, and, okay, maybe, maybe this quest is a little bit boring than it was last time, and maybe, the bad graphics for the time don't really, let's say they only get worse, as graphics and then the whole technology behind video games gets better and better, you just tend to notice it more, but, okay, the, texture resolution isn't there, but the atmosphere is, and the atmosphere never goes away, no matter the graphical quality of what you're watching. But then, that's not all. The story's there as well. The compelling characters, the dialogue, the quests, the intrigue, the stuff that really makes that game good is there. What do we have for a lot, not all, but a lot, of modern AAA games? Do we have anything to go back to after years? Not really, right? And there are exceptions to this. I mean, there's perhaps a long list of exceptions, but I feel like almost the majority of AAA video games that come out now, I will never play ever again. I'll give you even an example of a great video game that I don't think I will ever play again. Jedi Knight. Sorry, not Jedi Knight. Not the old one, the new one. Jedi Academy, was it? Give me a second. I'll look up what the actual name of the game is. The Dark Souls-esque Jedi game in the Star Wars universe that recently came out, well, a couple of years ago. Just give me a second to find out the actual name. It was Fallen Order. Sorry, not Jedi Knight. Whoops. Okay, there we go. It was Fallen Order. Jedi Knight was the old game that was kind of the opposite of... I was thinking about it as a sort of opposite example of what I'm about to talk about, so yeah, that's the reason it came to mind first. That's a great game. It's a Souls-like I said, Star Wars game. Not really Souls-like, but some similar elements, right? And it was really fun to play, but I don't think I'm ever going back to that game. And some people might, you know, there's certainly games that you really enjoy, but I think on the whole, it's not going to have the same lifespan and life expectancy as something like New Vegas. Because content for New Vegas is still being created. Hell, mods for Vampire the Masquerade are still being updated to this day. The game's like 50 years old. At least that's what it feels like. I know it's not, but it's very old. Whereas with this, with the Fallen Order, there was a couple of lightsaber mods, and there was a few skin mods for, you know, reskinning different enemies, and then that's about it. To be fair, the modability of the game versus something like an older Total War franchise, or an older Total War game, is completely different. Also, Vampire is kind of easier to mod than Fallen Order in some aspects, though I know little about... Well, I know next to nothing about modding Fallen Order, I know little about modding Vampire, but I do know a fair bit about modding old Total War titles like Rome, Medieval 2, which basically are the... Believe it or not, they're basically kind of the same game, right? From a modding perspective, you kind of do the same things. The code's the same, and they run on the same engine, and yeah, like, it's... Yeah, there's the differences, obviously, especially if you're, like, going to go out of your way to make overhaul mods, then yes, you will notice that there are differences, of course. But as far as, like, simple mods are concerned, stuff that I've made, they're basically the same game. And yeah, that plays a factor, and that, you know, that is a thing, definitely. Okay, I am not I'm not denying that, but regardless of all these things, I think if we look at a sort of global average, nowadays modern AAA games just aren't up to snuff in this longevity sense. And I don't know, call me paranoid, but I almost think that's on purpose. Not that they're making them less good on purpose, that they are purposefully making average games for the sake of them not being played years later because, I don't know, it's some evil conspiracy or something. No, I think that a lot of companies are striving, a lot of AAA companies are striving for mediocrity on purpose from an economic perspective, because they know that they are going to sell an X amount of copies. And they know that if the game is 10% better than it is, that's not going to make a 10% increase in sales. Now, does that mean that games flop on purpose? Of course not. But I think, and I don't think this is a conspiracy, I think this is a business decision, and I'll get to business decisions in a little bit and say a few words about that. I think this is a business decision to not release games in their best state, but to release them quicker. Not provide the most amount of content for the games, but just provide some content so that it will sell to a certain extent. Because the truth of the matter is, we don't know the financial details of every company. We can guess at how much games sold, we can look at some financial reports and, make some inferences, but at the end of the day, you don't know every single dollar that they've paid. Perhaps they've calculated, and perhaps this is now a trend or almost like a financial constant, that maybe making a 10 out of 10 game isn't worth it. That it's better to make a 6 out of 10 game cheaper than a 10 out of 10 game. Especially if you weigh in the risk involved, because, okay, say you give your development team an extra year to complete the game. And I think this Warhammer 3 example is great for this. How many people have bought Warhammer 3? Quite a large number, right? How many people would have bought Warhammer 3 were it in, the oven for another year and came out with better reviews? Probably more, but how many more? All the hardcore fans of the Total War franchise and all the hardcore fans of the Warhammer franchise, in all due likelihood, have bought Warhammer 3. Their money is in your pocket. Now, the DLC that you can, release afterwards and make on the game is going to suffer, but, perhaps that's maybe just the point. You release an average game and then you fix it with DLC. That's starting to sound like Paradox. Yes and no, depends on the title. We'll see how they continue, but I'm not gonna say that they're completely innocent of that. It's, at least to me, it seems like it's all about economy. You weigh the good and the bad versus of releasing like a 6 out of 10 game. And you say, okay, well, maybe if we work a little bit harder, it'll be a safer bet that we're going to make that much money. But maybe we can risk it and release a 6 out of 5 out of 10 game, not get great reviews, but release it sooner, the production cost will go down, and, we'll still make a profit. What's the final tally? How much money do we make? Or maybe it's about the same, rather than just release it right now and we can move on to the next project. Thus, by gaining time, we've effectively gained money. And that's also something to consider. If you spend a year making a video game, an extra year or an extra 6 months making a video game, that's an extra 6 months that you're not making some other video game, or not working on some other project of any type, really. That's also something to consider. I mean, is it the most important thing ever? Probably not, but it factors into the equation, and these equations that I'm talking about, even though so far, I'm talking basically out of my arse, I don't know any of this for fact, I don't work in the video game industry, I'm talking about this from a consumer perspective, but this is what it seems like to me, that all of this is just business. And that's fine, companies exist to create profit. But in this case, that whole idea is damaging to the industry and damaging to the consumers, in that the quality is suffering, the quality of the product is suffering, and because this has become a sort of new standard almost, because, especially for AAA games, there's not much we can do about it, right? Because everyone's doing it. Everyone nowadays is releasing a ton of DLC for their games. Not literally everyone, but far too many for you to go, okay, I'll boycott the next Paradox game if it has too much DLC. Well, yeah, but then Battlefield will continue to sell loot boxes, or Call of Duty will sell season passes, and, there's gonna be a ton of DLC for Warhammer games, or for Total War games, where, instead of releasing 50 factions, or 10, 15, 20 factions on release, they're gonna release 4 and then charge you an extra 5 for every future faction. And don't get me wrong, sometimes that is warranted, because it's extra work that's been put into the game, it costs a lot of money to develop, it costs a lot of, production, it costs, you need to hire people and all of that, and I get that, that's fine. Sometimes, though, it's just a reskin. And favorite example of Warhammer, because Warhammer Total War, because I've played that game to death, honestly, I have, a couple of thousand hours in it, is kind of guilty of both. I mean, they have sold just reskins, and they have sold stuff that genuinely at the time wasn't worth its price. I mean, they sold the Beastman twice, need I remind you. Mind you, the Beastman rework was free. So, you know, good on them, congratulations, that was the right thing to do, and I applauded them when they did it, but I also said that they, you know, before the rework, you could buy the Beastman DLC, and it was horrible. It was more than horrible, it was the worst faction in the game, and like the least fun, and it was terrible. And you were supposed to pay for it, like, it wasn't in the base game. It doesn't... That doesn't... No, that doesn't make a lot of sense. That's not how you do things. And fine, you know, like, that's just one example, and maybe, you know, there's worse things out there, I'm sure, but you get the, you sort of get the point, right? It's this economic weighing of whether I should make the game better or not that's, I think, part of this problem. And the other part, I think, which isn't something that's, you know, irreconcilable or something that needs to be changed immediately, but something just to maybe think about, maybe to, you know, implement in the future or find a solution to in the future, is that back in the day, development teams used to be smaller. This meant that, let's say me and you are making a game, and we need help, and we hire 10 other guys. In the 90s, you didn't really have even 10 other guys. You know, like, some of the classic games of that time were made by a couple of people, and, okay, maybe they had help from an artist and a sound designer and, you know, a couple of other guys that would code something, and there you go. But, like, the team could fit in a room. Nowadays, games are often made by hundreds of people, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Matter of fact, you would sort of expect that it's a good thing, right? You get more people involved, you get more artists, more people to code the game, and Juggernaut, are you saying that because it's more complicated, it's now worse, because, you know, there's more moving parts? No, not necessarily. Having more people on board doesn't necessarily mean that you stray from the original idea, or that you create more bugs, or more problems with the game, or whatever. It's something you can solve because you have more people, you have a lot more eyes to work on the project, right? You have more quality control at the end of the day, you have more, you know... It doesn't have to be a bad thing at all, but here's the thing. If you and me are working on a game, let's say you and me are making Doom, right? You and me are making Wolfenstein 3D. Me and you, we really care about Wolfenstein 3D, right? We really want this to succeed. We're on the same picture, we're very much motivated, and we have this passion towards the game. Now, you know, because this is our love child, this is our idea, and yes, I'm Juggernaut, you're having children with your audience. Is that what we're supposed to get out of this? Look, listen, let's forget about that for a second. Go with me on this rant for a second, right? We are passionate about the game, we care about it. It's, you know, it's something that we're making, not just because we want to make money and just because we want to sell it, but maybe we really actually want to create this as a work of art in some perspective, or I don't know, as a really, really fun game that we would both like to play. Yeah. Maybe not, maybe. We are passionate about the project, right? It's kind of like starting your own company or something. Sure, ultimately you are doing it to make money, but you got to have some drive and passion behind what that company's going to do. You're not just going to make a faceless, nameless corporation that's going to do faceless, nameless things you don't care about, because it's not going to work. You need to genuinely, at least a little bit, care about what your company's doing, and make sure that it's doing it properly, and only then will it succeed on the market. At least, you know, I don't run a company, but based on what I know and what I've heard, that sort of makes sense to me, right? If you don't care about the company, you don't put the time and effort in it, it's not going to work. And in order to put time and effort into something, you kind of really need to care about it, right? At least I do. I cannot put effort into something I couldn't give a, monkeys for. I really can't. And I had those situations in, I'm going to say in life, and you're going to think I'm 50, or, 150 or something. But no, like, I've worked a job that I absolutely despised, and I quit it, because I absolutely despise it. It was just bureaucracy, and I could not give a monkeys about what I was doing. And as a result, I wasn't doing a terrible job at it, but I was doing the bare minimum, right, of what was expected of me as a new hire and whatnot, right? If I cared about the job, I mean, fracking hell, I would have learned things about it, and I would have worked on things outside of my work hours. I would have thought about the job outside of my work hours. I was like, maybe I should do this, I should learn how to do this next when I come into the office tomorrow, and oh, I forgot to do this yesterday, I'm going to do that the first thing I get tomorrow, and stuff. If you don't care about the job, you're not thinking about it, right? Same for video games. If you don't care about something, you're not thinking about it. So after about 15 minutes of this rant, if you and me care about a video game deeply, and we want to put our time and effort in it, and, all of that, what are the chances that if you and I hire another 500 people, that all 500 of them are going to have the exact same attitude towards the game as we are? Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that because of this, every game that has a large development team is going to suck. Objectively wrong, right? There are many games that are classic, that are fantastic, that are beloved, that people play over and over again, that have large development teams and large budgets behind them and stuff like that. That's not a one-time thing. This is not something that has never happened or whatever. It has, but it is a challenge to overcome. And with AAA video games, you always have massive teams. That's sort of part of the business, right? You always have these gargantuan teams of hundreds of people, hundreds upon hundreds of people sometimes, doing stuff about the game. Different things, but still about the game. Does that influence quality? Does that influence what I talked about, which is creating a truly fantastic game that doesn't just get the job done, but actually, people like and want to play over and over again and will come back to in 10 years? Maybe. Again, exceptions, not in all cases, blah blah blah, but I think it is relevant. I think it is relevant, and because the gaming industry has just become just that, a money-making industry, a lot of this passion, I have to say, has been lost. Due to the sort of mass production attitude behind it, where, instead of making levels for the game, as someone would do back in the day, like you would make a whole level for Wolfenstein or for Doom. No, now your task is to make one picture in that level, or two pictures, or design one enemy, or design two enemies in a corridor or something, and then Jimmy next to you is going to design the next corridor, and okay, yeah, they will be similar. You are going to have to follow the same sort of theme of the game and the aesthetic of the level, and maybe we'll talk about quests. You will design one quest, he will design the other, but you know what the main character is, the story of the game, what it's supposed to be, so there will be similarities, but I feel like even if you make a good product, the passion behind it is gone, and then you lose the ability to make a great product. I'll give you a really great example of a game that I think had a lot of passion inside it. And I apologize, I'm going to use a swear word, which I think I already did, just a censored version of it. I don't like swearing in my videos. It's not just a censorship YouTube thing, it's just, I don't like it. I don't swear a lot in real life unless unless it warrants it. I feel like in this situation it isn't really warranted, but it's a quote, so I have to, right? in Medieval 2 Total War, if you look at the code of the game in the engine for traits that various characters can get, specifically the generals in your army can get. There's a difference. Not the generals, the family members in your army can get. Family members leading your army, which are generals, but not every family member. Every family member is a general, not every general is a family member. Small difference, I know, it's a Medieval 2 thing, right? Don't worry about it. But anyways, here's the thing. If you look at the code, one of the traits says, wife is bitch. The other trait is, wife is normal, I think, or wife is fine, or something like that. In the game, it doesn't actually display as wife is bitch level 1. No, it displays as, I think, argumentative wife, spouse is abusive, or not abusive, but I don't know, spouse is something, and then it goes up in, like, severity, right? There's flavor text behind it as well, so, like, the wife or the spouse of this character tends to yada yada yada, which affects his, I don't know, loyalty, or it affects his ability to command troops, or something, and then there is flavor text behind it, and you get the explanation of why something's happening. But in the code, it's wife is bitch. Which is really funny, and it didn't have to be done like that. Matter of fact, it would have... I wouldn't know if it would have been easier, but it would have been more professional, and it would have been colder to just copy the name of the trait and name it like that in the code. So if the name of the trait is wife is abusive, or wife is combative, or I don't know, something along those lines, then name the trait wife underscore is underscore argumentative, or wife underscore is underscore abusive, right? And then there you go. You just copy that off into the flavor text, just delete the underscores, and there you go. But no. What you also have in Medieval 2, if you really dig deep into the code, and, you know, I say dig deep, you just open a few files with Notepad++, you're going to find comments into the code. And I think for one of the scripts, there was a comment that said, "Don't ask me why this script has to run like this. I wanted to do it in a simpler way," is the TLDR of it, but it doesn't work. It's funny, and it was left in. Right? Nobody deleted that comment, it was just left like that, and the game shipped, and if you were to buy and download Medieval 2 today, you'd open the files, and you would find that line, and you would find those comments, and you'd find the traits. There's also a bunch of other funny references to the names of traits and to the IDs, or technically it's not the name of the trait, it's the ID of the trait, which is how the game refers to it in the files. What you actually see is flavor text on top of how it's supposed to, how the game refers to it. There you go, just you've learned something. But you know, minor details. But you can see that people that made the game genuinely cared about it. I think that, you know, that's what I'm getting out of it. I really am. I think that the person that made those traits thought that that was really funny and decided to keep it in and went, you know what, fine, let's go with that. I need a name for, you know, for the trait when the spouse of the character affects his combat ability or something. What do I do? Okay, here we go. Wife is bitch. That's the negative. What's the positive one? Because I need a negative and a positive, and that's what I'm doing today. That's what I'm being paid for. Wife is normal. Okay, next. It's funny. To be fair, nowadays it would probably be interpreted as, I don't know, some type of harassment or sexism or something. Yeah, I know. But you gotta understand the game is about the medieval times, so you can't really apply 2021 standards to flavor text that was supposed to be in character for the medieval times. You know, you gotta give it some leeway in that sphere, I suppose. But yeah, you don't really have that anymore. most of the time you don't have access to, well, you don't have the ability to read stuff like that at all anymore in games, which I guess, you know, we're trying to be professional and avoid controversies in the future and stuff like that. Alright. But even if you did, yeah, or even if you do in some cases, it's just, there's nothing there. It's cold, it's heartless. And the game often feels like that too. The game often feels like, you know, Fallen Order was a good game, don't get me wrong. It was fun. I played through the whole thing. The story was interesting, the combat was good, especially the boss fights. But there were some annoying elements to it. But this is the thing, I don't feel like ever playing it again. Because I 100%ed the game, so I got every collectible, I got everything. Unlocked everything, and I felt like I'm done with this game, and I don't really see a point behind ever playing it again. Okay, there were a couple of scenes and a couple of visual moments which were really cool, like the destroyed Victory class cruiser. I think it was Victory class. Was it? No, it wasn't Victory. It was a something class cruiser. I forget. Sorry, my Star Wars lore is not the finest. If you ask me about 40k ships, I could talk to you for a couple of days probably. Star Wars, not so much. It was the oh, I forgot what it's called. It was a something, wasn't it? Like the Advent. Oh, I was gonna say Advent. No, that's XCOM. Yeah, I don't remember. I'm not gonna remember by the end of the video, probably. Sorry, but yeah, it was you know, a old Republic cruiser that you would investigate, and it was destroyed, and it was being stripped for parts, and you know, go down there and find out what happened to the crew and stuff. And yeah, okay, it had a few moments, but I found the story kind of emotionless. In that, yeah, the character's being hunted for his abilities. Ooh, he's meeting a couple of characters with tragic backgrounds and something. And oh, the main villain has actually been abused and tortured and something by the other character. And okay, it's not bad. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't really care about it, honestly. Sorry. I mean, it served its purpose in the story. It was fine. I went through it and it was engaging and exciting, but it wasn't really memorable. It wasn't something I emotionally cared about. It wasn't something that I keep going back to and be like, ah, damn, that was really deep and profound and impactful, and I really think about that nowadays. I still think about Vampire the Masquerade quests. I still quote some of the characters from that game. I very, very much care about Mass Effect quests. Mass Effect 1, 2, 3, okay. A good part of them, yes, up until the ending. I did have some other problems, but for the most part, yes. I remember my reaction to the ending of Mass Effect 1, to the ending of Mass Effect 2. I remember my reaction to the ending of Vampire the Masquerade, which was like, it felt a little bit unfinished, the ending, because I thought, like, okay, I expected a sort of conclusion to my character, but no, instead, that was just the beginning, and that was kind of the point of the game, that, this was, you're a neonate, right? You're new to the whole world, and this was your baptism, as weird as that sounds, given the fact you're a vampire, and this was, you only go up from here. This was, obviously, these are the final nights. This was a big event, but at the same time, you don't get closure. You just started, right? You're not even 5,000 years old. How dare you seek closure? Kind of the vibe that gave off. And okay, I still think about that. I still think about Jack and his comments and him sipping beer at the end. I think about the taxi driver. I'm focusing on a specific game just to provide an example, right? It doesn't have to be a story. It can be gameplay elements. I'm still thinking more. I'm going to sound like I'm obsessing over this, but no. Occasionally, I still remember some of the games that I had in Rome Total War. I still remember playing Deus Ex. I still remember playing, I don't know, what were a few other games that I really liked? Oh, The Witcher. There you go. I mean, both 1, 2, and 3. I remember the people. I remember some of the monsters in both mutant form and both in human form. I remember the politics behind it. That was impactful. That stays with you. That's deep. But most AAA games, nah. You know? It's just poof. Gone. Average and then gone. Or fun, good, engaging, maybe you give it a 9 out of 10. When you put it down, I'm done with it, never coming back. That's it. Oddly enough, a weird combination of the two for me was Cyberpunk. Because Cyberpunk had some really emotionally impactful moments where you thought you were going to die, where your friend dies, and okay, it was a bit... It wasn't done, you know, at a particularly high level. You didn't really get to know him that much. You didn't spend much time with him. He dies rather quickly in the game, and all of these good moments are littered sort of in between the bugs, the crashes, and all the problems that the game had, and the lack of some of the content where you expected, and, you know, stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, you know, this is... Yeah, but it did have a few moments like that. It was a weird combination of this sort of mediocrity and averageness and kind of being memorable and worth your time much later after all the hype has gone down. Seems like nowadays, and I'm wrapping up, it seems like nowadays that the moment a game, well, again, this is for most AAA games, the moment it's not on the Steam top sellers list anymore, nobody cares about it, nobody plays it, and it's not novel, it's not fun, it's not interesting anymore, there's nothing really there. You're just like, alright, next. Multiplayer is a little bit different. Multiplayer games have, you know, a large part of their appeal is in the people that you play with. So, you know, they're there to set up sort of a base for your enjoyment, but a large part of the enjoyment is the people that you're playing with. So, some of the fondest multiplayer memories I've ever had was in PlanetSide 2, but that's because I played with the developers in a platoon, in a unit of about, I don't know, a couple of hundred people, maybe, with like generals and commanders and coordinated strikes across the map, and it was a one-time event, or a once-in-a-lifetime event, basically, where we were the paratroopers. We would drop behind enemy lines. We would drop on top of the enemy just to scramble their formations and knock out some of their equipment, and that was great. And mind you, the game wasn't... Let's just say it had a lot of problems, but the enjoyment was derived from the coordination with other people, so not quite the same. This mostly goes for single-player games. But the whole quality aspect of what I talked about stands for multiplayer too. Yeah, anyways, that's me for the day. That's something I thought about, and I think it's interesting to consider. Now, I'm not saying that all AAA games are bad, and that, you know, I'm not even making social commentary. I'm just saying that this is a challenge that exists, and that it would be nice if we could overcome it. Or challenges, I suppose, because I mentioned a couple of different things. But at the same time, one that we're kind of powerless against because it's bigger than just the consumer base, bigger than just the fans of one particular universe. So, yeah. I want to talk about, I wanted, but I'm not going to, because it's going to take like 6 hours or something. Talk a little bit about movies as well, and how I feel like they've almost gone down a similar path, in that it's been a long, long while since I've really enjoyed a blockbuster Hollywood movie that was, you know, deep, that I connected with, and that I would rewatch in a couple of years. It's not that many. Occasionally something will come out, but from the 2000s and the 90s, it feels like, you know, there's a truckload, but from 2010 onwards, maybe 2015 onwards, well, no, I'll keep it at 2010. From 2010 onwards, there is, here and there. And yeah, that's about it. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all next time in another video, hopefully a bit more cheery and about something more delightful to talk about. Who am I kidding? I'll just probably play Stalker again. I'm absolutely loving that game. But yeah, that's sort of the main content that's going to be coming out in between. Well, not in between, but occasionally I will post something like this, or first impressions, or whatever. That's it for now. Okay, I've taken up way too much of your time. Thank you for listening. Have fun, take care, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye. Or evening, depending on when you're watching.